Hi, and welcome to episode 6 of the podcast. Today our guest is Renee Beck. Renee is a marriage and family therapist with a private practice in Oakland, California. She specializes in dreamwork and transpersonal therapy for alternative healers, inner seekers, and artists. She is an approved clinical supervisor at California Institute of Integral Studies and has supervised more than 100 beginning therapists working towards licensure. She is the author of The Art of Ritual and has worked with dream, ritual, energy, and symbolic systems for over 4 decades. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with Renee as she takes us deeper into working with dreams, understanding masculine and feminine energies, and also how feminine energy can be expressed healthily and not so healthily in women. Hi, and welcome back to the Women in Depth podcast. Today, our guest is Renee Beck. Renee is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice in Oakland, California. She focuses on working with alternative healers, inner seekers, and artists, and her approach is from a transpersonal perspective, and she integrates dream work into her work with clients. Hi, Renee. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Lourdes. It's great to be here.
I am so excited that you're here today because I really want to just dig deep into how you work with dreams and learn from you and be inspired, because I love working with my own dreams and integrating dream work into the work of my clients, and I know how powerful and healing they can be.
Yes.
And so thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure.
If you could start with sharing a little bit about yourself and your practice with our listeners.
I really love helping people access their unconscious. A lot of time that involves shadow work, going underneath the pain and the fear, the darkness, to the things that are hidden there that are precious. We may hide talents and gifts that weren't safe to be expressed when we were younger for whatever reason. We may hide our strength, our beauty. There's all kinds of wonderful things available to us. And it's also a way for us to connect with that which is larger than ourselves. And there's an incredible amount of joy and beauty and strength available there too. So I work a lot with dreams and imagery and metaphor. And one of the things that I love to do with whatever comes up for clients in session is work with them to figure out a way to ground that out in action during the week. As I think insight is great, but without moving it into the world, it doesn't do much good. So.
Renee, when you mentioned the unconscious and shadow work, I was thinking about how people might interpret that. And I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding and assumptions about what the unconscious is and what shadow is. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. We have our conscious mind, which works pretty analytically, and we use words to communicate on that level. I mean, our conscious mind is great, and we get to notice things and connect with people and animals and the earth and learn things with our analytic mind. And it's kind of like daylight. If you look at our world, it's pretty much set up dually. We have night and day, dark and light. And it's one of the ways that humans look at things. We break them up into opposites. We had talked about dreams in the feminine, you and I. And the feminine is not women. It's an archetype. It's a kind of a pattern of consciousness, and it's the receptive part. It's the part that holds and contains. It would be kind of more like right brain, and masculine would be more left brain in that framework. And the masculine, again, it's not men. It's more analytical, more direct, going outward, as opposed to the feminine, which is more going inward and holding. And so you put the two of those together, and we've got a balance. We've got receptive and the dynamic, the dark and the light. Richard Moss used to say, consciousness loves contrast. We can't see anything unless there's contrast. Our eyes are moving constantly all the time in little micro movements to contrast the different light waves that are coming in. So we can't see the dark without the light, and we can't see the light without the dark.
I love how you describe that, because I do feel that looking at the world dually is really almost just what we can come to expect and not see beyond. And when you don't consider that there's this other aspect or this other part of you that's just as significant, that is just as meaningful as what you can see and what you can hear, and how not knowing about that, not honoring that part of you, that there's an effect.
There is. There definitely is. I mean, we're both of those things, and each of us has a tendency slightly more towards one than the other. We can get polarized, and I think one of the things therapy is about us creating balance within ourselves and within our world. And to do that, we need to look at the part of us that we're not attending to as much so that they can balance out.
Yeah. I love that how you emphasize that feminine and masculine doesn't refer to men and women.
No.
That these are patterns, these are energies that exist in all of us, and both of these aspects need to somehow come together and be honored so that person is living a more balanced or experiencing a more balanced life.
Yes. Yeah. And of course we will go, more one way or the other many times a day. That's part of the dance. And I do think of our consciousness and our healing as a dance to try to create that balance so that we can move and express ourselves. And sometimes we may fall over a little bit, but we can catch ourselves and come back, or our partner can pull us up,
Yeah. So can you also describe what transpersonal therapy is? Because I can imagine that many of our listeners won't know what that means, and I'm not even sure if I understand it completely.
Okay.
So if you could describe that a little bit more, that would be great.
Sure. The prefix trans means over, beyond, or through. Like the Transcontinental Railroad went all the way across and through the country. So transpersonal means over, beyond, through the personal. And a lot of more traditional psychotherapy is framed as looking at the mind and emotions and behavior. But transpersonal also includes creativity and spirit, in whatever form that takes for people. Because it's not a spiritual creativity doesn't have to include a religion or a spiritual path. It's the thing that fires you, that takes you beyond yourself. It may be an art form, it may be a sport, it may be cooking. It can be anything, that those moments when we become one with what we're doing, when we get in touch with the larger meaning that is. I think with runners, it might be a runner's high. When you're in the zone, that's what I think of as the creative and spiritual aspect of the self, because it does help us unite with more than just ourselves.
When you were describing that, I was just thinking about, the healing process in therapy. And, one of the things that I've observed in my work with clients and also in myself is that the most significant, meaningful healing comes when you can access something larger than yourself. And for for some that's a religion. For some that is being a mother or a father.
Right.
But there needs to be something, again, I think, to take you out of where you are and to move you into, like you said, the word trans means over, to kind of overcome and to be above what is happening. Not that you are not working through it or that it's not dismissing that, but it's another way to cope and to heal.
Absolutely. And it's having a larger picture. There was an article recently on wonder and having a sense of wonder and awe.
Yeah.
And my Facebook page, I post lots of pictures of galaxies and amazing life forms, because the wonder that exists in our world is something we really need to connect us with the bigger picture, with that inspiration. Especially if you're doing hard work in therapy, if you're struggling with things that you have had to keep unconscious in order to survive, in order to get by, it's so important to connect with that sense of something larger, that my existence is not just my struggle. It's connected to all these wonderful things. And it can take us out of that sense of despair sometimes.
You described that part of this experience is being almost like a runner's high, or in that
Uh-huh.
sense of wonder. And it made me think also of, children when they're playing. They're
Yes.
just,
Yeah.
they are completely in the moment, and children are just fascinated, by things that, as an adult, you just think, yes, that's a piece
Look at,
of foot. Yeah.
yes, look at that stone. Oh my goodness.
Yes. Or, wow, that's aluminum foil. What can we do with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that part of the process of connecting with our unconscious and these deeper aspects of ourselves is finding those experiences of wonder and of joy and awe. And it's interesting because the path to these experiences really goes through, the unconscious, or going deeper. It almost, you're required to go within so that you can step into that larger picture. It's just interesting, that paradox.
Yeah, it's the balance again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Rini, can you please share how you feel that dreams and working with dreams can help a person to connect to the larger part of themselves, to finding something bigger?
Oh, there's so many different ways to work with dreams. And some dreams don't really need work. I mean, we have dreams that really don't seem to mean anything, but we have dreams that I'm sure most people who dream have woken up going, oh my God, what was that? And just a dream that sticks with you. When it does that, it's trying to get your attention. It says there's more in here for you. When you, certainly people know nightmares and how big those are and how scary those are. And there are also dreams that are just gifts, where the big dreams that are just beyond anything we could imagine in our conscious mind, they take us totally into another state of connectedness, into a sense of meaning and purpose. I mean, those aren't really common, but working with our more regular dreams, we can get a piece of that. We can get connected with that. And my belief and my experience is that the dreams are trying to communicate with us parts of our unconscious, parts of how we function, or what's going on with us that we're not aware of. But again, it's not an analytical form. It's a more receptive, a feminine, a darker form. And so rather than speaking in words, it speaks in symbols and symbolic acts. And by doing dream work, you can find out what that's about by doing dream work when you're awake. My favorite thing is to have the person dialogue with a dream image, to have a conversation with a dream image, and or to take on, to act as though become one of the dream images, and for me to talk with them with that image and find out where they came from, what the message is, what do they need from the waking self, how can they help that waking self. And I mean, that may be a person image in the dream, it may be a shoe,
Right.
It may be a fox, whatever it is. And that makes us much more whole unto ourselves. I mean, I think unconscious material, we stuff things into our unconscious all the time. We have to do that when we're looking around the room, because otherwise we wouldn't do anything but look around the room. We'd just be looking at that color, oh, and then look at that color, and oh, look at that shape. We have to work and we have relationships. So we're taking in all this sensory information, but we can't pay attention to all of it. We have to, let it go in our unconscious. And there are certain experiences that we have that at the time are too difficult for us to deal with. And so our soul, our self, whatever you want to call it, puts that into our unconscious to hold it and keep it until we're ready to work with it. So some dreams we have are going to be really hard and scary because we've been protecting ourselves from the information for a long time because it wasn't safe to know about it. I mean, it can be something like the principal yelled at me in first grade in front of my friends and I was humiliated. And maybe you remember the event, but you don't remember the emotional part of it. And for some reason that comes up in a dream. It may be abuse. It may be something that's happening now that is really hard to deal with and we can't. So We repress our feelings about it because we just can't afford to feel them right now, and it'll come up later. But sometimes what comes up when we're struggling with something is, even if it seems scary, may actually be the key to healing it, because our unconscious that repressed that information in the first place is only going to present it to us when it's safe for it to come out, and we have the resources to deal with it.
There's so much that you said right now that I was just going, yes, I need to ask more about that. So I just wanted to first say how I love that you describe that some dreams present gifts, and there's just a gift for the dreamer.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of times with those types of dreams, it's almost difficult to even really describe what the gift is. It's a sensed feeling. Mm-hmm. It's an intuition. And with those types of dreams, I've found that it's almost only for the dreamer to understand and to know what it means for those really big ones. And I also love that technique you described of getting into relationship with the images in the dream, and whether that is a person or, as you said, a shoe, but dialoguing with that part and finding out what they need, what they're here for. And I think that's also an incredible way to practice self-love and self-compassion, is honoring these parts of ourselves that show up in our dreams and taking them seriously. It's almost this, instead of it's just a dream, it didn't mean anything, saying, no, this is important. This dream has come to me for a reason, and there are messages that are here for me if I will listen to them.
Yes. I think there are also messages in the waking world, too. I mean, if we look at the things that we adore, if we look at who our heroes were when we were younger, for me, some of those were the Rolling Stones. And there are these people that hold parts of ourselves that we haven't totally accepted. We kind of see it out there rather than own it in here. And for me, that was largely my creative self for the Stones. And I mean, lots of people have heroes like that, or idols, or it may be a sports figure, it may be a politician, it may be a minister, it may be a musician, an artist. And I think people maybe understand that a little. I mean, when you have this just this sense of kind of urgency about your feeling, it's kind of like when you have a dream and it's like, oh, what's going on here? Oh, this is important. I don't know why it's important. But there's that little sense of urgency, which makes you either want to run towards or run away. And
I love that.
I like to follow that and see where that goes.
That's powerful. I never considered that strong urgency to either move towards or to run away, but really that does mean something. And, we do hear messages, and there are messages in the waking world. Looking at those messages as seeing ourselves, because whatever that is, whether it's, a musician, a poet, a teacher, they are reflecting something back that we recognize and is almost just calling for our attention in some way, which is that pull.
Yes.
Or it could be the revulsion, moving away.
Yeah.
And I also loved your description of how the unconscious has a protective function.
Yes, it has a protective function, and it has an inspiring function, and it also allows us to rest. I mean, we sleep a third of the day, more when we're younger. And we need that. I mean, physically we need that, and unconsciously we need that. It's during sleep where our memories made from kind of short-term to longer-term memories. I mean, how many of us had a problem and, somebody says, oh, sleep on it. And sure enough, you wake up in the morning and you know what you need to do.
Right.
I mean, we can't figure everything out consciously. That's only a part of ourselves. So there's great wisdom available in our dreams if we can just pay attention and communicate with it when we're awake.
Renee, could you speak to what the divine feminine is and means, especially as it relates to a woman? Big question.
These are archetypes. Again, those patterns of energies that all humans relate to. And if you look at any story, any fairy tale or myth or really good movie, there's going to be these symbols of universal patterns in there. There's going to be a hero. There's going to be an adversary. There's going to be a struggle. And in a really good story, there's going to be overcoming the struggle. It's going to be the hero's journey. We all go through that. We have all experienced that. We all experience times of rest and times of activity, times of going into real darkness within ourselves and going into real joy within ourselves and feeling ecstatic, moving out, right? And feeling deep. And that may be not so good in terms of how we feel about it. But there are those times, sometimes when you are sitting as a woman and you're feeling really solid and you're feeling powerful in that. That's the feminine. That's what we call the great mother. And you had talked about, how we can get stuck in one or the other, or people will tend to polarize. And I think part of the reason there's so much sexism is because we are in a dualistic universe and we tend to, unconsciously equate the more receptive form, which in human biology is obviously the female, as opposed to the more active form, which I'm just thinking in terms of, creating new people. We've got, the womb, which contains and holds, and we've got the penis, which sends out the sperm that we need to create a new life. And so we tend to look at women or the feminine as dark and men as light. And in our culture, certainly, we put the quality of badness on the darkness and goodness on the light.
Yeah,
again, because we tend to polarize. And unfortunately, that also works within our culture in terms of different colored skin. And it's just not true. We need darkness, we need light, we need action, we need stillness.
So, just to kind of jump into what you were describing as, the feminine being perceived as bad and the masculine as good, and the light and dark. I think that also goes in line with, sometimes viewing stillness or quiet or feeling as weak, and action and movement and dynamism as strong.
Yeah, we live in a culture that really likes extroversion and outward action and does not value the inward, more quiet, more contemplative way of being. And we need both. We need both, and we need them both equally. We're working on it. But it takes a long time, and it takes a lot of individual work to recognize where we need to become more active, where we need to become more still. And it is an art. If you think of a really good stand-up comedian, what's their main thing? It's timing, right?
Yeah.
It's when to move forward and when to be still and how. But we have to have both. I mean, any work of art is about timing, or that contrast, the correct way to contrast things to move people.
So, Renee, in terms of a woman and her experience of the masculine and feminine archetypes, what could it look like if a woman was moving through life polarized to the feminine, and maybe the masculine aspect is not being honored, is not being given attention? What could that look like? Because again, the need here is for integration, for balance, for both. So, for a woman who is more identified with the feminine, which, you would think, just listening, not too deeply, that that's a good thing, but what is the shadow of being too identified as a woman with the feminine?
The shadow aspect of the feminine is passivity when movement is needed. It's being able to receive anything and everything without limits. And I think a lot of us as women know that it can be difficult and or dangerous to speak up, to set limits with people, to object to behavior that's hurtful, and to make excuses for people. Say, oh, no, that person didn't really mean that, when in fact the person did, So, in that part of it is going unconscious about things that are dangerous to us, and what receiving hurt without setting limits.
And what you describe really, I think, for at least in my experience, it really captures what a lot of women bring to therapy in the sense of not speaking up, not taking action, putting others first to their detriment, not being open to receive, where they're just giving, taking care of everyone else, but not able to create that space or even feel that that's something that they need or deserve. And in, just the codependent relationships, and really you can just see how the healthy expression of the feminine is something that women struggle with.
Yes. I'm just thinking of, I love gardening. Gardening is one of my joys and feeds my soul. I mean, especially when we are in a position where the culture also expects us to do those things. There are ways to get nourishment from the feminine that actually will feed our inner masculine. Like if we can get in touch with the positive aspects of the feminine, nature, working in the dirt, the ocean. If we look at the 4 symbolic elements, you have the earth, and then we have water over the earth, and then we have air, and then there's the sun, which all of these work together in terms of life. And earth and water are generally, it's in different systems, it's set up differently, but I generally consider earth and water to be the feminine elements, and air and the sun to be the masculine. And so what we've got there is we've got body and emotion. Earth is the physical world, water, the emotional world because it moves and flows. Air is the intellectual world. I think partly we put that there because we speak. We speak with air, but it's the world of the mind and analytic thinking. And the sun is the creative, spiritual aspect. I mean, if you think of how good it is to go take a soak in a hot tub and to feel supported,
Yeah.
And even with bubbles, and bubbles are round. And generally, the feminine is represented in round, receiving shapes, round shapes. Masculine is represented more with straight lines. And so if we're in a bathtub and there are bubbles, that's receiving support from the feminine. So, I mean, we do things that symbolically feed us. And we can do a few more of those because that's using the great feminine to support and nourish us.
What you were saying about, how we can implement the feminine through, in our daily lives, whether it's connecting with nature, putting our feet in the dirt and walking barefoot, or taking in the ocean. For you, planting, working in your garden, it's connecting with the feminine. I think a lot of the aspects of self-care and self-compassion are also energies of the feminine expression.
Yes.
I spoke to another colleague, and she described how cooking a healthy meal for herself was actually a very loving act, a very nurturing act. You're creating something that will feed you. And when you were just describing that, that's just what I thought of, is all of these other ways that the feminine shows up.
Yes. And when we were talking about wonder before, that is one way we can feed ourselves too, is to allow ourselves in just a few seconds here and there to look about and see, the sun hitting those leaves. Look at the different colors of green in there. And to just receive that sense of beauty. And that can only take a second. But that can be self-care too. In the midst of a busy day, to find something of beauty and to take it in, to receive that.
I love how you've expanded just what receiving can encompass. It's also including, the sunlight falling on the leaves, the raindrops on a door. Yeah. Actually, mindfulness in the moment and paying attention to what your senses are taking in.
Yes, it is. And, the gratitude exercise where you write down 3 things you're grateful for every day, that can be hard to do sometimes. But there's always something, and it may be something little like that. It may be, I am grateful that this tea is just the right temperature, just something like that. It's just being aware of the possibility of beauty that is around us every day.
Yeah, the beauty that we don't see because we're so busy moving through life. So really, too, I'm thinking that with the feminine, there's a slowing down.
Yes, the feminine is very slow, and the masculine is very fast. Yeah.
Yeah, because in order to notice, to be in awe, to receive, and to fully experience what you're receiving, there needs to be a slowing down, which I think is also something that our society really doesn't support. You know, it's a very fast-moving, action-oriented,
Yes.
stay busy type
Uh-huh.
of culture. And so to slow down and to be still and to just take things in is really something that is not encouraged or supported.
I sometimes recommend that people block off certain periods, even if it's only 15 or minutes or half an hour, of nothing into their calendars. Because I did that in grad school. It was really important to just nothing. I'm not going to do anything right now. I mean, I can do something if I want to, but it's not going to be anything related to anything I have to do or should do. And mostly just to sit back and, wow, okay, here I am. Yeah, this is okay.
Yeah, and I can see too how creating space to be, how that can be very frightening and difficult for some people because of what can arise from that stillness, from that space.
Yeah.
And I think that also connects to maybe the darkness or the shadow or the fear around the feminine, is that when you create space for the feminine, there's a space to go deep.
Yes, there is. There has been some research that people cannot sit for an hour in a room by themselves without nothing to do. They can't. People get up and pace and go crazy, which is really sad.
Yeah.
But one of the things I love about therapy is, a client comes in and this time is just about you. It's a space that it's just about you. You have someone there to help you who is totally focused on you and your needs and your process and your growth. And I've been in therapy numerous times, and I just am so grateful for it, to have a companion with that and to help me go into myself and go deeper, especially when it's scary.
Yeah. I love that you brought this back to the therapeutic encounter and that container, which is really a holding space for what is and what will come up, and being with another person in a time where, this is something that maybe they would run from, avoid, and yet helping them to stay there.
Yes, as much as they can be. And I mean, I know you do and I do too. Trust the therapeutic process. I trust the client's process immensely. They are going to grow and heal at the pace that it's safe for them. And our job as therapists is to help create that safety in the therapeutic container in our relationship.
Renee, this conversation has been incredible. It really has turned into this exploration of what the feminine is, what it can look like, how it can be experienced, where it shows up, and also just connecting it to a woman's experience of the feminine.
It's really fun talking to you.
Thank you. I'm enjoying this as well. If you could share with our listeners, what are some ways that they can begin to explore this on their own?
They can look at women that you admire, and what is it about them you admire? We talked about projecting our inner qualities that we don't own onto heroes. What are some of the women or people that exhibit feminine, what we think of as feminine qualities, that you really admire? And how could you be a little bit more like that? What's one little thing you could do that would be more like that? And that may be more self-care. It may be setting a better boundary. And setting a better boundary may just be you're in a hurry and somebody comes up to you in the grocery line and has one thing as well. And they say, I'm in a hurry. Can I get in front of you? And you say, I'm sorry, no, I'm in a hurry too, as opposed to saying, sure, go ahead. If it's not an important thing, you can set a limit there. And in terms of dreams, Lourdes, you have a great blog on how to remember your dreams, which I would refer people to. So I would say, dude, if you dream, either keep a journal and a pen right by your bed, or you might want to record verbally and start writing your dreams down. Whatever you can, whatever you remember. It may just be when you start recording, it may just be a flash of a color or a sense of something, but write that down. And try to do that regularly. And when you have a dream, write out the dream and share your dream with someone that it feels safe to share your dream with. And another way to work with that is to do some art around it. I mean, maybe dance it, or, draw it, or make a cartoon out of it, or make a song from it, or cook a dish from it, and do something with it in the world. If you had a dream, say, when gave a friend a hug that you hadn't seen in a while, I mean, you might want to figure out what part of yourself that person represents that you're reconnecting with. But you also might want to shoot them an email or just say, hey, how you doing? So bring it into the world. These are things that our unconscious is giving us, and it's coming up for us, and let's ground it somehow. I'm not saying go kill somebody if you kill somebody in your dream.
Right.
But when there's something good that you can actually share in the world, why not?
Renee, one of the things that listeners might be wondering about is the use of dream interpretation books or online dream interpretation websites where there'll be an image, maybe it's a bear, and meanings of that. And can you speak to, the use of other resources for finding meaning in your dreams versus, not using them?
I use some it's called symbol immersion by Jung, where you explore the different meanings of the dream culturally and archetypally. But there's also the personal level and the familial symbolic level. A teacup is generally a symbol of the feminine, of the receptive. It holds something, and it holds water, so it holds liquid. A teacup, depending on the type of teacup, has different cultural meanings. Is it a teacup that's used in a ceremony? Is it a mug? What kind of people would use that teacup? Now, teacups in your family, there may have been a special set of teacups from your great-grandmother that were passed down. A teacup may have been smashed near your head. So there's symbolic, there's many levels of symbolism in your dreams, and you're the only person that can really know what they mean.
Yeah.
And I'd love to explore all the levels of those. And also, even the words about the things in the dream. They can be puns. If people are really into words, I'll have them look up the origin of the word, the root meaning of the word, because that's something they do anyway. And so let's find out if that meaning is involved in the dream. So it's really personal. It's really personal. And I'll explore that with people, but they're the only ones who are going to know.
So really, if someone is thinking of working with their dreams and using a resource or a source for meaning, to just really emphasize that there are so many levels of meaning and layers of complexity, and really needing to explore what is resonating and meaningful for them.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I would highly recommend learning about archetypes, because all of the cultural symbols can kind of be embraced in the archetypes because they're so big, and the archetypal symbols show up in every single culture. They may look differently. In Western religious culture, there, for example, is a creator and a destroyer. In some other religious cultures, the creator and the destroyer are the same deity, but the concepts are still there. Or there may be different kinds of creators and different kinds of destroyers. So the concepts show up in every culture. If you look in religion and myth and fairy tales, you'll see all the same. We're humans. We all go through the same process, and that's where they show up. Because that will allow you to, I think that human connection, recognizing these are things we all experience. This is our human shared existence, brings us out of ourselves, as well as giving us a context for understanding our dreams.
So really seeing that these are human universals that connect us all.
Yeah, and that's where we go when we sleep.
Renee, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you or to find out more about you, or if they would like to work with you?
Okay, my website is reneebeckmft.com, and you can contact me through there. I do dream work with folks online anywhere, dream work consultation for therapy and supervision or clinical consultation. I work online in California, and I have an office in Oakland, California.
Renee, thank you so much for being here and your time and your wisdom and your insights. I loved our conversation, and I
Me
just
too.
feel so inspired and moved by everything that you've shared.
Thank you. It's really been a joy talking with you, Lourdes.
Take care. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Renee. I felt like I could have talked to her for hours. What stood out for me is how our dreams can be a powerful source of wisdom and guidance if we are open to their messages. Another part that stood out for me is just how important it is to be aware of how masculine and feminine energies are expressing themselves or not expressing themselves in our lives. For show notes to today's episode and for links to the resources Renee mentioned and her website, visit www.lourdesviado.com/women in depth. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe on iTunes and leave a review. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.